Hello and welcome to Keeping Up With Conspicuous. We've got Microsoft MVP Nathan Clouse here with us today. So we're going to talk about many things. We're about Nathan's journey. We're going to talk about integration. We're going to talk about all sorts new things coming out from Microsoft. So yes, welcome Nathan to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
That's all right. Well, yeah, well, we always start with where most podcasts start with a little bit of an introduction. So why don't you give a little bit of an introduction to yourself and and what you do on a daily basis?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Nathan Clouse. I'm a Microsoft MVP. Have been for 5 years, and I've been working with AX/F&O about, I want to say, 16 years at this point. So using it, calling it AX sort of dates me a little bit because some people may not even know what that is anymore. But I started in the year 2019, starting with AX 2009. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
started in 2009 with AX 2009, just as a developer, and just sort of decided, I really like X++, so I've decided to stick with it. And now the product has just grown and grown since Microsoft acquired it, and I've just sort of stuck with it and learned more and more and more. And started out doing just dev type stuff, and now I'm a technical architect. So I spend a lot of my time designing integrations or just making sure data is available for consumers in some way. Mostly integrations, but still overall solution architecture and delivery. So what I do on a day-to-day basis, and then we'll do, as needed sort of technical deep dives for clients that need extra assistance or extra guidance around how they're going to get F&O into their product portfolio and get integrated with everything that they transact in on a daily basis.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, well, that sounds like it keeps you busy. So,
yep, very busy.
And so what are the common, what you're seeing at the moment that you've probably seen it for years, but what are the common issues that customers are having, or maybe what are customers not thinking about, when they're putting in a system, and what are the solutions that you'll come up with that you're seeing, where you're seeing pain points?
So, I mean, I focus on integration. So a lot of what I see are not necessarily issues, but more just a shift in how we need to think around integrations. Having worked with AX, 2009, 2012, those were on-prem solutions. So when you start, designing your solutions for how you're going to talk to stuff, how you're going to get data in and out, you're sort of looking at it through the lens of, I have on-prem resources. So I have access to my database. I have access to a file system. I have access to all kinds of on-prem type resources. And then when you look at a cloud-based SaaS offering, FSC/F&O, what don't I have access to? So like it's a bit of a shift to think, like on the tech side, F&O doesn't necessarily know what a file system is. Which, if you think about that, you're like, how can it not know what a file system is? Well, it's a totally different application hierarchy. And I don't want to get too technical, but it's delivered in an entirely different way. So we can't say, oh, I've got a file system. I have to sort of plan around that. So I don't have access to a file system directly. I've got blob storage, which is sort of related. So when you that's just one example. You've got to design different solutions, and they have to be cloud first. So there's a lot of just mental shift and training around, if I want to send out an event that I created a customer, for instance, that's, a data event that goes to a queue, and then we process messages from that queue, and we use that as an event to trigger the next series of interactions, whatever those may be. And mostly that's, I focus on just training and education. Opposed to why we're doing, this is the solution that we're proposing. Here's why we're proposing it this way. Here's the access, that we have to all these different technologies. And this is the guidance from Microsoft. And that's a lot of what we focus on, just because there's just a fundamental shift. And it's, it's still happening now, where we have quote unquote legacy customers, AX 2009, 2012 customers that want to continue with the product, but now it's delivered in an entirely different way. So they've got to readjust their thinking to say, like, this, we're going from on-prem into the cloud, and we have to rethink how we design stuff at a fundamental level rather than just more of the same. Like, if I need access to data for a report, I can just go to the database directly and get get data like that. That's not an option we have anymore. So just items of that nature to adjust thinking.
Yeah. And so do you find almost that if someone do you think someone going from I don't know, say a company going from a cloud-based system that wasn't, F&O to F&O, do you think that is an easier transition than going from, say, an on-prem solution to F&O? Do you find that, I suppose you probably have a lot of people, on, different cloud ERP going to F&O, but I mean, do you find that cloud to cloud is easier than on-prem to cloud?
Typically, yes. Just in terms of like that adjustment and thinking, because we have a lot of the same ideas from different big tech firms, even small tech firms, but the implementation of those ideas is a little bit different. But when you take a look at like Logic Apps, for instance, for Microsoft, that's not a unique idea. There's lots of other software firms that do that. The way Microsoft does it is their specific way. But AWS and Google have similar offerings. So we just match those core ideas up from their cloud solution provider to how Microsoft does it. And that's how we can sort of make that a mental bridge to say, we're moving from this cloud runtime to Logic Apps. Here's how Logic Apps might be a little bit different, or here's how it works. And then use that to, sort of find the commonality and say, this is how it's going to be, like this 80% is the same. This 20% is a little bit different and unique related to Microsoft. But then, that's how we sort of cross that bridge and then deal with anything that may be different once we get across that bridge.
Okay. Yeah. And so you find the customer, I mean, I don't know, I'm sure, people in senior IT leadership do always think about this, but do you find that they are always really thinking about integrations when they start the project, or does it fall sort of far down the list, or what have you found in terms of, because I'm sure there's different scales of integrations, obviously, depending on the size of the company and I guess how complex perhaps their legacy system was, but do you find that it's something that they need a lot of education on, or do you find that it's something that they've already pretty much thought about very well? I don't know how do you, when talking about that first meeting when you go in, and then what that's like when you're speaking to someone who's decided to go for thinking about going to F and SCM.
So typically there's like at the leadership level and near that level, there's a lot of understanding around cloud offerings at a high level. So there's not a lot of specifics around, like here's how the cloud works and really basic stuff, because, there's a good understanding there. What I spend a lot of my time talking about is, in truth, it's cost. Because when you're going from one system to another, like especially with my on-prem customers, they're used to near instantaneous integrations. And that's because everything is on-prem. They've already paid for it, and they don't think about the true sunk cost of having a SQL server. So like most people are like, oh, I've just got SQL server, that's fine. And then the one person in the organization that has to see the bill for how much it costs to license 8 CPUs to get SQL Server plus the actual server plus Windows plus everything that all the infrastructure behind that, they don't see those costs, but they do see the costs of Azure, because Azure is billed monthly, and you can see directly at this one particular thing as a line item on an invoice cost me $5. There's much more visibility in the pricing. So when we look at designing and just enterprise integrations, we have to look at like, here's what the business wants. Let's determine what the lowest SLA is, because that'll be our cost driver. And then we can, sort of move the SLA up or down based on that cost. But, we see a lot of interest like around making sure that ledger transactions are available immediately for reporting. And that's fine. There's an associated cost with that. So when you say, I want ledger transactions to be in my Power BI reports within 30 seconds after they posted, that's fine. We can accommodate. But also there's an associated cost with that. And then when you look at the cost, you're like, oh, well, maybe I can wait until the next day. Well, then the cost goes down significantly. So there's sort of this sliding scale of, if you want it now, there's a price for that. If you can wait an hour, there's a price for that. If you can wait a day or till the next day, there's an associated price for that. Where's your comfort level and the cost to get it in a particular time frame. Because like with on-prem resourcing, in terms of just like SQL Server and all the associated costs, we don't really see it. So it's really difficult to walk through like, oh, well, Azure costs me, $5 per day to do this data availability thing. And then SQL Server is free. Well, SQL Server really isn't free. You don't see the $50,000 in licensing you pay once a year in order to keep it. And then everything below that, and like the power bills that you get once a month to run that on-prem. SQL Server, it's not comparing apples to apples. It's comparing like cats and dogs. It's very difficult, and we sort of have to talk through how the licensing model and billing model is different, and then how to again adjust your thinking to say like you're actually getting quite a lot of value. It's just presented as a different bill, and how to do those comparisons.
That's interesting. Of course, sort of comes down to, again, looking at your, like you mentioned there, that example with the, how urgent is this that you need? It's coming down to sort of, I guess, looking at your processes and going, how urgently do we need this? Obviously, it's going to come down to time and cost, isn't it? And how important it is to the business. So I suppose what you're doing a lot initially is just sitting down with the leadership team and stakeholders and going, what do you want your system to do? What integrations are super important to you and what are perhaps less so? So yeah, no, that's great. I mean, yeah, because there's these projects are huge, aren't they? And you want to get it right, and you don't want the cost spiraling. So you need people like yourself to give, sensible advice to go, well, how, I guess a lot of the time you have to say to people, do you actually need this? Or how important is this to your business? I guess is probably one of your most common questions. I'm guessing.
Yeah, because I mean, when you look at on-prem, and I'm going to paint with very broad strokes here, and every organization is different, but you'll have typically sort of one department that is on the top of the tier, where whatever they ask for, that they get. And because everything's on-prem, you don't see like the true cost of, like I want a trial balance report that is accurate up to the minute. That's fine. Again, we can do it. Like there's a lot of stuff we can do, but then there's an associated cost, and surfacing that cost from like a cloud infrastructure solution coming from an on-prem solution. People don't see that cost on-prem, and they're like, well, why is it so much more expensive in the cloud? And it's not truly any more expensive. It's just you get to see it. You don't see that, like you don't track like accounting as a general like department. You don't track their watt hours per gigawatt hour used for processing reports. But that's how Azure is built. But like on-prem, everything is it's paid for. If your SQL Server sits and does nothing, it costs you the same generally.
Yes.
Than if it's fully utilized 100% of the time. But Azure bills differently, so we have to start looking at yes, I understand you want this near immediately, but do you use it near immediately, or is this just something you've always had? And now we need to take a look at the actual cost associated with that, because it's in a different model. So we've got to talk through what that means and how the business uses that data, what the process is, and when they actually truly need it to progress with their processes, versus when they would like to have it, and separate out those must-haves versus nice to haves.
Yes, yeah, no, so yeah, there's definitely, I mean, from my side, I think we're seeing. I think I mentioned to you earlier, about a lot of customers, particularly once they're on the cloud, are trying to bring in a lot of talent in house. That obviously has Dynamics experience, but also, is amazing integration work and has, all the Azure technologies that they need as well. And I think we were talking, weren't we, that there's a bit of a lack of talent in that area. But there's obviously great partners but great people like yourself and Armanino who can make things like that work. But we've seen recently a lot of people trying to do that in house. I mean, are you seeing that as well? That your customers are trying to build teams in house who can do this, or are you finding them actually rely more on the partners? I mean, what are you seeing in terms of that relationship?
It's unique to each organization, I'd say. So some organizations are okay with outside help, like partners building the solution and then transitioning that over to that organization does all the like care and feeding of it. They do all the support, and everything from a support side is in house. Some want to just have partners there as guidance. And make sure, hey, have you thought about this? You're going to have to plan for this, like that sort of, guiding hands. But they're just there as an advisor to make sure you've thought about, what your solutions are going to, what the true costs will be. And then some are fine with just outsourcing everything, like sending everything to a partner. For the build and care and feeding. And then it's just a cost of doing business for them. So it really depends on the organization. But great partners have people who are willing to help in all areas, whether it's just guidance, guidance and delivery, or guidance delivery, design, and maintenance as well. So it really depends on the organization. And again, it goes down to, usually it's industry specific. Because some industries can absorb a higher total cost of ownership for a solution, and some cannot. I have a lot of experience with food. Food has very thin margins, so they're going to have a particular mindset around maintenance and solution and building. Then some like service organizations may have more of an appetite for maintenance being performed outside of their organization, just because I'm assuming professional service organizations have much larger margins than like a food manufacturer would.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it does vary so much company to company. It depends on budget and how they operate their IT team, and what they're looking to do with the project. So yeah, absolutely. It does vary loads. And I mean, it's still, because I guess there's both. You get some brilliant talent who are in-house, you get brilliant talent at partners as well. So as long as everyone's working together, then the project is going to be successful. So it's just about that constant communication between the partner and the customer, and then it will all work seamlessly, right? That's the idea.
Yeah, that's the
idea. And you mentioned earlier, because I think we've got, some viewers. You mentioned there was something new from Microsoft that's come out in the last week. So I don't know if there's. I think we always like to give a bit of advice on this podcast, and for anyone listening, Nathan can talk you through it. But what was the kind of new advice or something new that come out from Microsoft this week?
Well, Ignite was this week, so there's been a lot of new stuff from Microsoft. But what I wanted to talk about was there was commentary on a report that Microsoft had released around implementations and technical debt. And I really wanted to hone in on one piece of advice. And it was that Microsoft had noticed a lot of integration technical debt came from the lack of use of some kind of middleware. Obviously Microsoft is going to advise that you use their middleware layer, function apps, logic apps, and Power Automate. But the core idea there is that I think people that have been with AX and F&O for a while, have grown up in a way with that on-prem mentality of, I've got I want to interface with my bank. So on-prem, I have to go to an FTP site to get a file to process. In the cloud, it's entirely different. I don't want to, as a general rule, connect directly with a resource if I don't need to, because for instance, the FTP server might be down for maintenance, and that's going to service an error in FSC, and I don't necessarily want to have it there. I want to have something out in between, my bank and FSC in this instance, to facilitate communication, do the extract, transform, load, and then FSC would only surface the load errors, meaning it can't identify a bank account, or it can't identify like some surcharge that was placed on a bank account. We can't find a mapping to a code or something like that. There are ISVs that do this pretty well to begin with, but this is just an example. We want to introduce something that is in the middle, that can handle a lot of the errors that are tech-related errors. So like, I can't see that thing. Like, I can't see my source system. I don't know how to translate this from X to Y. Items of that nature, and then keep the errors that surface in FSC related to business process type errors. Like, I don't know what code 01 is for customer groups, for instance. Items of that nature, where the middleware layer, my logic app, I'm a big fan of logic apps because I think they are a good sweet spot between Power Automate, which is simple, and function apps, which you can do whatever you want with, but you have to, know a programming language. Logic apps for me sit in the middle and provide a lot of value, but we want them to be not dumb apps. We want them to do a particular job, but only do that job, and that's the extract, transform, and load at a per message basis. Then have FSC still do the business stuff, because it's an ERP platform. That's sort of what it's good at. But when you look at X++ is a great language. That's the language that FSC is written in. But it's a business language. It doesn't necessarily compare to C#. And if you like, one of the things the example that I love to give is for all my XPP groupies out there, try and do a sort on an array in X++. Just try and do it. In C#, it's super easy. It's array.sort, and then you give it some parameters. In X++, we don't have a built-in sort method. Like, there's no way to sort an array. Like, and I know you're not a technical person, Alex, but that's something fundamental that almost every programming language has. Just to highlight that X++ is a business problems first language, not a real world practical problems language first, like C# is. So that's just one way to think about it. But having that middleware layer really helps alleviate a lot of the failures that Microsoft is seeing from their enterprise scale customers. That really helps drive delivery, overall reduction of errors as the product matures, and elimination of technical debt, meaning stuff that is X++ centric or FSC first centric, because that's still a niche skill set. But when we move stuff out into Azure, we still have niches inside of that, but there are a lot more Power App developers in the world than there are X++ devs. Same with C# and just Azure resources in general. But having someone that understands the whole chain of events is still sort of a niche skill set. That's something I focus on. But that's just unifying teams where I say, hey, here's the message you're going to get. Here's how this surfaces. Here's how you get more information if you're interested. But then from there, it's just that particular Azure skill set or Power Platform skill set. But doing that knowledge transfer and handoff is critical, and is becoming more and more critical.
Oh, great! So that's what Microsoft's saying. They're saying for customers looking, they need to sort of look at their middleware more, or invest more in their middleware, and make sure they've got logic apps to make their system function. Is that what that's sort of the advice coming out? Was it to make sure that the middleware is they really assess what they're doing on that side of things?
Essentially, yes. I mean, I think the messaging from Microsoft was to not have FSC be, like they call it, the orchestration engine, not have FSC be the central point of the hub for integrations. We need to have that be middleware, and then you do have another thing to manage. But again, we're separating out different concerns where IT is interested in the middleware, making sure it's doing its job, and then the business owns, that the business process that IT infrastructure supports is configured and works and is highly documented and understood for whatever the Azure infrastructure supports.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And so, do a lot of customers not have that middleware layer at the moment, then, or or they just is that something that customers haven't really done so much of, or what are you finding with customers?
Typically, there's sort of two modes that I see a lot. One is, FSC centric, where X++ or X++ and C# do a lot of the orchestration inside of FSC with batch jobs, which is, it's fine. But when you start scaling up, it becomes less fine. Or just complete leaving everything unmanaged. So
Right.
there is, there's small scale integrations. No one watches them. It might be a function app or a logic app, Power Automate. They just sort of run and do their thing, and if they have an error, no one sort of pays attention.
Yeah.
And whatever the missing thing is, someone just says, "Oh, I didn't get this from this thing. I'm just going to type it in and move on with my day." And that's
Right.
for our very small scale customers,
Yeah.
where like I've got one particular customer. They have four transactions that come in per day. Like that's the scope of their integration platform. And if one fails for
Okay.
whatever reason, they get a report from that system and they just type it in summary and say post done and move on.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's not ideal, but again, it goes down to scale. So,
Yeah.
4 transactions per day is near nothing
Yeah.
when you compare to like some ecom customers that are doing 100,000 orders per day. So there's
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's judicious use of technology where it makes sense, and where we want to reduce errors as much as we can. But then some organizations are just fine with errors and they move around them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, no, that makes sense. Well, some really good advice, because Microsoft's coming out with new things all the time, and I think
Yep.
it's worth it. It's great they've got people like yourself who can, you know, keep your ear to the ground and work out what's going on. So, and then tell everyone. So that's fantastic. So, um, oh, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. And one question that we always like to end the podcast on is if you were, and I know you love your job, so but if you weren't a integration expert, and you could do something maybe even outside of technology, what would be your dream job if you weren't doing what you're doing?
Um, I think something to do with AI and trying to make sure that AI isn't used for bad things. Like I'm not sure what that job would
Okay.
specifically be, um, but it's just been an interest of mine because I think we have a lot of new cool stuff with AI, and sort of in the background, there's a lot of people who are using it, let's say in bad faith, using it to
Yeah,
do things that are in a gray area or just outright illegal. And we need to make
yeah,
sure that we're ahead of the bad actors that may exist. And I
mm,
think that would be just really, really fun and a challenging problem, because I love working on integrations. But if you've seen one GL integration, you've sort of seen them all. I mean,
mm,
it's accounts, it's debits and credits. There's not a lot to it. Every organization is different, but
mm,
like post to close inside of an organization. I mean, that's pretty much
mm,
the same almost everywhere. Again, a
mm,
little variation, but when you're like, I think AI, like going after AI bad actors in some sense, is really interesting because you've got a problem that is a thinking person just like you. So they're going to continue to evolve, and try and circumvent stuff you build. So then you have to continue to think and evolve to break the stuff that they're going to build. So it's this um, never-ending problem, and I think that sounds really interesting to me. I mean, others may not think so.
mm. I think
Just
so.
that,
So, yeah. So like an
yeah, because I mean,
AI Batman.
yeah, against AI Joker, yeah.
Well, I mean, that is definitely going to be something that we need, isn't it? AI, AI regulation is going to be such a hot topic over the next few years because, like you say, when there's a new technology, someone normally wants to use it for bad things, and you've got to have some sort of regulation to make sure it's not. Otherwise, poor people are just going to get they're going to get tricked by like you say, like bad actors who are using it for harm. So definitely that's I completely agree. That would be a very, very cool job because that's like constantly thinking ahead, isn't it? Thinking ahead of the criminals. So that'd be very cool. So yeah. Oh well, well thank you very much. Lovely to have you on, and we will definitely catch up at there's a few conferences next year, aren't there? So we'll definitely meet up again at the next conference. And to everyone listening, I don't think we've got another episode before Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving to everyone. And I think we've got another episode coming up after that. So thank you very much for coming on and being with us today, Nathan. And we look forward to seeing everyone again soon.
Yes. Well, thanks for having me.
No, thank you very much. Well, take care and have a good rest of the day.